In the quiet bustle of the hospital's sterile corridors, Mrs. Campbell and Sophia prepared for their grueling night shift. The harsh fluorescent lights above cast a clinical glow on the two women as they sorted through medical supplies and checked their lists. Mrs. Campbell, with her silver hair neatly tied back, moved with an unhurried grace that spoke of decades in service. Sophia, young and vibrant, darted around with an energy that seemed to buzz through the air. As they worked, their conversation flowed from mundane work topics to more personal matters. The older woman's face softened as she turned to Sophia, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her lips. "How are things with Lucas?" she inquired, her tone light yet laced with a hint of something Sophia couldn't quite place. Sophia's face lit up at the mention of her boyfriend. "Oh, it's going wonderfully. He's planned a weekend getaway for us next month," she shared, her eyes twinkling with excitement. But her smile faded slightly under Mrs. Campbell's steady gaze, which seemed to harbour a shadow of doubt. "My dear," Mrs. Campbell began, her voice dropping to a compassionate whisper, "I've seen many young hearts make the same mistake. I fear this joy of yours may be fleeting." Sophia's brow furrowed, her initial irritation mingling with confusion. "Mrs. Campbell, I thought you of all people would be happy for me." Mrs. Campbell reached out, her hand gently squeezing Sophia's. "I am happy for you, Sophia. But I've walked this earth long enough to see the signs. Lucas, bless his heart, isn't your equal. His world, his class, they're miles apart from where you stand." Sophia laughed, a clear, ringing sound that echoed slightly in the empty hallway. "Mrs. Campbell, we live in modern times. Love isn't about class or status anymore." But the elderly orderly was not swayed. "History often repeats itself, dear. And often it's not the big things but the little differences that widen into chasms too vast to cross." Sophia's laughter echoed lightly in the sterile, white-walled room, a sound that seemed too bright against the clinical backdrop. She had paused at the doorway, her hand resting on the cold metal frame, and turned with a smile that radiated both warmth and nervous excitement. Walking back to where Mrs. Campbell stood, her steps carried a mixture of determination and a subtle tremor of anxiety. "Mrs. Campbell," she began, her voice dropping to a confessional whisper, "there's something I haven't told anyone else yet. Lucas and I are expecting a child." The news landed in the room with the weight of a profound secret, making the air feel suddenly dense. Mrs. Campbell, a veteran in controlling her expressions through countless shifts and patient interactions, managed to keep her face composed. Her heart, however, told a different story, pounding with a mix of fear and concern as she absorbed the weight of Sophia's words. After a moment, she mastered her emotions enough to speak. "How did Lucas react?" she asked carefully, masking her apprehension with a tone of professional curiosity. Sophia's face fell slightly, the shadows of worry flickering across her features. "He doesn't know yet," she admitted, biting her lip. "I plan to tell him this weekend. I thought it would be special to share the news during our getaway." Mrs. Campbell's heart skipped another beat, her fears amplified by the revelation. She knew Lucas had measured the man with a clinician's eye and found him wanting. His charm was effortless, his smile easy, but his eyes, they were too calculating, too dismissive of Sophia's genuine affection. From the first meeting, Mrs. Campbell had sensed his superficial commitment, and now, with a child on the way, the stakes were unimaginably higher. Yet, as she looked at Sophia, her face alight with the glow of impending motherhood, Mrs. Campbell found herself biting back her dire predictions. It was too late for warnings, too late for doubts. "That sounds like a beautiful plan, Sophia," she said finally, her voice gentle. "A child is a blessing, and who knows? Perhaps this news will be the making of Lucas. People can surprise us." Sophia's smile returned, bolstered by Mrs. Campbell's words. "Thank you," she said, her eyes gleaming with tears of mixed emotions. "I really hope you're right. I want this to bring us closer together." As Sophia left the room, her departure marked by a soft click of the door closing behind her, Mrs. Campbell remained standing, lost in thought. She felt a deep, unsettling mix of hope and dread. Hope, for Sophia's sake, that Lucas would rise to the occasion. Dread, because experience had taught her that hope was not a strategy, and people rarely changed their fundamental natures. The long-awaited weekend had finally arrived. Lucas arrived at Sophia's apartment in his slick sedan, its engine purring with the promise of a getaway. Sophia, filled with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation, had packed everything the night before. They were headed to the local hot springs. The drive was scenic, winding through lush forests and past small towns that reminded Sophia of her own roots. The hot springs had been a magical place for her as a child, where the warm waters seemed capable of washing away the cares of the world. She hoped it would cast the same spell on Lucas. As they approached, the newly reopened resort gleamed against the backdrop of sprawling woods, its welcoming lights flickering like stars come down to earth. The day passed in a blur of happiness. They soaked in the soothing waters, the heat loosening tight muscles and easing the ever-present tension between excitement and fear in Sophia's mind. By evening, they were dining in the resort's cozy restaurant, the rustic charm of the place enhancing the flavors of a hearty meal. After dinner, as they walked back to their room, Lucas's mood seemed as light as the breeze that rustled the leaves overhead. He was playful and affectionate, showering Sophia with kisses that sparked giggles from her. The intimacy of their connection in that moment felt like a reassurance of all the good things to come. But as they entered their room, Sophia knew it was time. She gently stopped Lucas, a serious yet soft look in her eyes. Taking his hand, she placed it on her belly, her smile tender, but fraught with the weight of her news. Lucas, confused at first, returned her affectionate gesture, his response fueled by the passion of the moment. As Sophia wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him, the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them. Then, in a whisper that carried with it all her hopes and fears, she broke the news. "Lucas, I'm pregnant." The change in Lucas was immediate. His hands, which had held her with such warmth, relaxed, and a frown creased his brow. He stepped back, his confusion turning to concern. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice uneven, betraying his shock. Sophia nodded, her own heart sinking a little with each word. "I've done multiple tests, Lucas. They all came back positive. We're going to have a baby." The room, filled just moments ago with laughter and love, felt suddenly charged with an uneasy silence. Lucas paced a little, his movements jagged, as if trying to align this new reality with his own expectations and plans. The warm glow of the room seemed to cool, and Sophia watched him, her heart caught between the joy of her impending motherhood and the realization of how much their lives were about to change. Lucas's barrage of questions had felt more like an interrogation than the shared joy she had envisioned. None of his questions sought to understand their future or expressed excitement about their child. Instead, they were logistical, cold, almost fearful. The harsh realization began to settle in, casting a long, unwelcome shadow over Sophia's thoughts. The warnings of Mrs. Campbell, which Sophia had pushed to the back of her mind, surged forward. She had told her about Lucas, about his likely inability to commit to anything serious, let alone a family. But love had blinded Sophia, made her deaf to those cautious words. Until now. Lucas finally stopped pacing, his eyes meeting Sophia's. I need some time to think," he said, the words heavy, loaded with an unspoken fear that made Sophia's heart tighten. As he walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind him, Sophia was left standing alone, the joy of her announcement overshadowed by the uncertainty of Lucas's reaction. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing as she replayed the last few minutes. As the minutes ticked by, Lucas emerged from the bathroom, his face set in a grim line. I need to go to town urgently, he declared abruptly. The explanation was vague, his eyes avoiding hers. He thrust some cash into her hand for the drive back home and hurried out, leaving a stunned Sophia in his wake. Her attempts to stop him, to demand some semblance of a conversation, were met with a hurried promise. I'll call you, he said, the door closing behind him. Left alone, Sophia felt as if time itself had ground to a halt. The vibrant colours of the room seemed to drain away, leaving everything bathed in a stark, unforgiving light. She tried to collect herself, to make sense of the sudden turn of events. After what felt like an eternity but was only 30 minutes, she picked up her phone and dialed Lucas's number, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. The call connected, only for Lucas to immediately hang up and send a terse text asking her to communicate via messages instead. Trembling, Sophia typed out a message, her fingers hesitant and unsure. You didn't even say you were happy about our child, she wrote, the words heavy with hurt and accusation. She hit send, the soft click of the button sounding unnaturally loud in the silent room. The days that followed were a torment of silence. Sophia sent message after message, each one a plea for some kind of response, some sign that Lucas cared, that they could still find a way forward together. But the replies never came. Instead, a cold text from an unfamiliar number eventually broke the silence. It's all over, it read, a simple statement that felt like a verdict. The next day, Sophia's heart thudded heavily as she approached the well-manicured lawn of the expansive house. The door swung open to reveal Rose, Lucas's mother, her eyes red-rimmed and weary, yet her posture rigid with defiance. Sophia, her voice quivering slightly with determination, spoke up. I need to see Lucas. It's important. Rose's expression was a mask of practiced stoicism. I don't know where that foolish son of mine has gone, she replied curtly, her voice tinged with a blend of irritation and resignation. As the conversation progressed, Sophia sensed the layers of empathy Rose projected were merely a facade. Once it became clear Sophia wouldn't be easily dissuaded, Rose's demeanour shifted, her words taking on a sharper edge. I told him to be careful around girls like you, to use protection, she spat out, her tone acidic. Sophia recoiled, the words striking her with the force of a physical blow. The hurt flashed across her face, quickly replaced by a dawning realization of the bitter truth in Rose's harsh admonishment. I was living in a dream, Sophia admitted softly, more to herself than to Rose. Rose, seizing the moment, pressed on ruthlessly. There's no way you and Lucas are going to be together, she declared flatly. From her purse, she produced an envelope, thick with the promise of silence. This should cover your expenses. Stay away from my son and stop trying to find him. You'd be better off back in your old town, she added, her voice cold and final. Sophia stared at the envelope, her mind reeling from the onslaught. Rose's next words were even more cutting, laden with venom. Girls like you use your advantages to lure in men like my son. It won't work this time. As Sophia turned to leave, Rose's voice followed her. I'm being nice now. If I see you again, I won't be so gentle. Stunned and deeply hurt, Sophia left the imposing house, the weight of the envelope in her hand, a grim reminder of her shattered dreams. The next day she returned to work, seeking solace in routine, only to be met with another blow. Her manager met her at the door with apologetic eyes and a firm tone. I'm sorry, Sophia, but your position here has been terminated, he informed her, refusing to meet her gaze. Reeling from the loss of her job, Sophia's day worsened when her phone rang that afternoon. It was her landlord, his voice unusually cold. You need to vacate the apartment. It's going on sale, he stated bluntly. Sophia's protests about her timely rent payments fell on deaf ears. It was clear now that Rose's influence extended far beyond the personal. It was a calculated effort to exile her from the town itself. Alone and cornered, Sophia realized the harsh reality of her situation. Without a job, a home, or support, she was being pushed out, not just by Lucas, but by a community that held Rose in high regard. With nobody else to turn to, Sophia stood outside the quaint house of Mrs. Campbell, her hands nervously twisting the strap of her purse. The streetlight cast long shadows that seemed to echo her feelings of uncertainty and trepidation. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the doorbell, the familiar chime sounding like a distant memory from her days at the hospital where she and Mrs. Campbell had worked side by side. The door swung open, and there stood Mrs. Campbell, her face etched with lines of concern and warmth. "Oh, sweetheart, come in," she said, stepping aside to let Sophia enter. Inside, the house was cozy, filled with the scent of lavender and something sweet baking in the oven. Mrs. Campbell led Sophia into the living room, where they settled into comfortable chairs by the fireplace. The crackling of the fire provided a soothing backdrop as Sophia began to unravel the tangled threads of her recent heartache. Mrs. Campbell listened, her eyes never leaving Sophia's face, offering a silent strength that invited confidence. Sophia's voice faltered as she recounted the painful details. Mrs. Campbell reached over, placing her hand gently on Sophia's. "You are strong, Sophia, and you are not alone now," she said softly. There was no trace of "I told you so" in her tone, only compassion and a promise of support. After a moment of silence, Mrs. Campbell spoke again. "Why don't you stay here for a while, just until things clear up a bit?" Sophia looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't want to impose. I should maybe call my mother, but..." Her voice trailed off, lost in the complications of a relationship strained and stretched over miles and silence. "Sophia, a mother's heart is never too far away. No matter what happened in the past, I believe she would want to be there for you now," Mrs. Campbell advised, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "But she was one of the reasons I left," Sophia confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. I needed to be my own person, away from her disappointments." Mrs. Campbell nodded, understanding more than Sophia could have guessed. Sometimes, distance gives us the space we need to grow, but it also gives us the perspective to see the bridges we can build back when we are ready. The bus trundled along the uneven road, its tires humming a monotonous tune that matched Sophia's somber mood. She leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, allowing silent tears to trace paths down her cheeks. Each droplet mirrored the shattered pieces of the life she had envisioned, a life that now seemed as distant and unreachable as the horizon. Sophia's mind wandered through the past 2 years since she had arrived in this bustling town with dreams of becoming a nurse. Those dreams had taken a detour when she failed to secure a spot in medical college, leading her instead to a series of minimum-wage jobs that barely scraped by. Ultimately, she found a semblance of her dream in the role of an orderly. It wasn't the path she had planned, but it brought her close to the medical field, surrounding her with patients who needed her gentle touch and kind words. As she reflected on her life, thoughts of her mother, Monica, came unbidden. Monica had raised her alone, a single mother battling the tides of misfortune and broken relationships. Sophia had grown up watching her mother endure the pain of abusive partners and the instability they brought. Despite these hardships, Sophia had thrived academically, her mother's struggles fueling her determination to build a better life. But now, as the bus speaker crackled to life, announcing her stop, reality snapped her back. She was returning to the small town she had once been so eager to leave, a place that seemed to promise nothing but echoes of her mother's hardships. Stepping off the bus, Sophia wiped her tears, her resolve hardening. The last 15 miles to her childhood home lay ahead, and she braced herself for the familiar, yet now foreign landscape. Standing beside the dusty roadside, Sophia felt the weight of the world on her shoulders as she tried to hitch a ride back to town. Several pickup trucks loaded with construction gear zoomed by, each one sending a puff of dust swirling around her. Just as she was about to give up hope, a truck slowed and pulled over. The driver, a man wearing a worn cowboy hat and denim jeans, rolled down his window and called out, "I'm heading as far as West Monroe Street, if that helps any." That's perfect, thank you, Sophia responded, relief washing over her. The driver hopped out and swiftly moved a hard hat from the passenger seat to make room. He noticed Sophia struggling with her suitcase and, without a second thought, hefted it into the back of the truck with ease. "Name's Tom," he said, flashing a friendly smile as he climbed back into the driver's seat. As they drove, Tom made small talk, asking Sophia if she was from around here. With a heavy sigh, Sophia admitted she was returning to her hometown, albeit reluctantly. "Unfortunately, yes. I'm coming back to live here," she shared, her tone tinged with resignation. "There's not much for me here. No jobs. Nothing really." Tom's smile didn't wane. "You might have picked the right time to come back then," he remarked casually. "There might be some new job openings soon." Sophia looked at him, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, but she didn't probe further. Instead, she settled back into her seat, her thoughts drifting to her mother and the challenges that awaited her. The prospect of new jobs seemed distant and unreal compared to the immediate reality of returning to a home dominated by her mother's struggles with alcohol. Throughout the drive, Sophia reflected on her past efforts to help her mother, the constant cycle of hope and disappointment. She had left to escape that chaos, to build a life free from the shadow of addiction. Yet here she was, heading back into that very storm. When they reached her home, Tom insisted on carrying the suitcase to the door. "It's no big deal," he assured her, dismissing her protests. Sophia felt a flush of embarrassment as she explained her inability to pay him or even offer a simple cup of coffee, uncertain of whether her mother was even home. "Don't worry about it," Tom said with a reassuring grin. "Just take care of yourself, okay?" Sophia thanked him profusely as he drove away. She watched the truck disappear down the road, realizing too late that she hadn't gotten his contact information to thank him properly. Sophia hesitated at the threshold of the small, weathered house she once called home. As the door swung open, her mother Monica stood there, surprisingly sober and radiating a joy that Sophia hadn't seen in years. The sight of her daughter seemed to electrify Monica, who began clapping and bouncing on her toes like a delighted child. Overwhelmed, Sophia's defenses crumbled, and tears streamed down her cheeks as the pent-up emotions of fear, relief, and hope all burst forth. Monica quickly enveloped Sophia in a warm embrace, gently patting her back as Sophia sobbed into her shoulder. "Oh, honey, it's okay," Monica soothed, her voice a calming balm. "I'm not upset you left. You needed to find your way. It's all right, really." As the initial flood of tears subsided, Monica brushed back Sophia's hair and kissed her forehead, a gesture filled with maternal love and reassurance. "I've missed you so much, sweetheart. But from now on, we're going to be all right. We'll make everything work together," she promised, her eyes gleaming with a mix of tears and happiness. Catching her breath, Sophia looked up at her mother, a flicker of nervous excitement in her eyes. "Mum, I didn't come back alone," she began hesitantly. "You're going to be a grandma." Monica's expression faltered for a moment, a wrinkle of concern crossing her brow, but it quickly gave way to a beaming smile wider than Sophia had seen in years. "A grandma?" she exclaimed, her voice rising in delight. "Oh, Sophia, that's wonderful! Why the tears, then? We should be celebrating." Before Sophia could respond, Monica grasped her hands and, with a surprising sprightliness, began to dance around the small living room. "We'll raise this baby together, healthy and happy," Monica declared, her energy infectious. "And if you want to go back to school or work, I'm here. I can babysit. The job market here's picking up, you know." Sophia's heart swelled at the sight of her mother's transformation. The despair and dysfunction that had once defined Monica seemed to have dissolved, replaced by a woman who was not only sober, but also full of life and plans for the future. They hugged tightly, and Sophia whispered her thanks, feeling a profound gratitude for this second chance. Taking the week to settle in, Sophia spent her days catching up with Monica, learning about everything that had happened during her absence. The town itself seemed to be slowly awakening from a long slumber, with new construction and the buzz of potential growth. Curious about the changes, Sophia inquired about the construction work she had noticed. "Yes, they're building a nursing home here," Monica explained. "Someone's finally seen the beauty in our little mountain town. It's going to bring jobs, maybe even some folks to look after." The news sparked a new kind of hope in Sophia. A nursing home could mean opportunities not just for employment, but for her to use her skills and perhaps even pursue her original dream of becoming a nurse. With her mother by her side, her unborn child a new reason to strive for better, Sophia felt ready to face whatever challenges came next. This small town, once a place she sought to escape, was now the ground on which she would build her future. For the first time in a long time, it felt like coming home. The nursing home stood proudly at the edge of town, its fresh paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. A large banner announcing the grand opening fluttered in the breeze, signalling a new chapter not only for the facility but for Sophia as well. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and hope, Sophia made her way to the building, her steps quickening with anticipation. Inside, the reception area was sleek and welcoming, with soft music playing in the background. Only a few staff members milled about, adjusting to the new surroundings. Sophia approached the reception desk where a friendly woman greeted her with a warm smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Yes, I was wondering if there might be any job openings here. I have experience working as an orderly," Sophia inquired, her voice laced with a hopeful tone. The receptionist's smile widened. "Of course, we're actually looking for staff. Why don't you fill out this application form?" she suggested, sliding a form across the desk. A few days later, Sophia received a call inviting her for an interview. The HR lady was cordial and enthusiastic about Sophia's background. "With your experience, you'd fit right in, especially with the influx of residents we're expecting," she explained during the interview. Sophia secured the job and soon found herself adapting to the more relaxed pace of the nursing home compared to the hospital. It was similar work, but the environment was calmer, less fraught with the high stakes of hospital emergencies. Life seemed to be aligning finally, though the growing curve of her belly reminded her daily of the approaching challenge and her fears of job security during maternity leave. One afternoon, as she walked through the town square, Sophia's heart leapt as she spotted Tom, the kind stranger who had helped her the day she returned to town. Surprised and delighted, she hurried over to him. "Tom, I didn't think I'd see you again," she exclaimed, her face lighting up with a genuine smile. "I never got to thank you properly for that day." Tom's easy grin appeared. "No thanks needed, really. It's great to see you doing well, though," he responded. Sophia's gratitude overflowed. "Actually, I was hoping to invite you to dinner, to say thank you properly. You can bring your family if you'd like," she added, a bit nervously. "That sounds wonderful, Sophia. I'd be honoured," Tom replied, his smile reassuring. Heartened by his acceptance, Sophia spent the rest of the day preparing. She shopped for groceries meticulously, choosing ingredients for a meal that would convey her appreciation. Back home, she cooked with care, her movements around the kitchen fluid and confident, a dance of pots and pans. As Sophia set the table, the savoury aroma of roasted chicken and herbed potatoes wafted through the house. She was nervous but excited. When she heard a knock at the door, her heart skipped a beat. She opened it to find Tom standing alone, a warm smile on his face. "Thank you for coming, Tom. It means a lot to us," Sophia said as she welcomed him inside. At the dinner table, Sophia was joined by her mother, who was beaming with gratitude. "It's so wonderful to meet you, Tom. Thank you for giving my daughter a welcome ride," her mother said, her eyes twinkling with kindness. Tom chuckled, genuinely impressed with the meal. "This is delicious. Sophia, you should consider a position as a chef at the nursing home," he teased. "I think I'm better off sticking with what I know best. Helping people who need it," Sophia replied with a smile. The conversation soon took a more personal turn when Tom glanced at Sophia's visibly pregnant belly. "The dad must be very lucky to have someone like you," he remarked. Sophia paused, the weight of her situation pressing on her heart. "Actually, I'm doing this on my own," she confessed softly. Tom's expression immediately shifted to one of concern. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry," he apologized. "It's okay," Sophia reassured him, offering a small but sincere smile. "Life just throws us unexpected paths sometimes." After dinner, Monica retired to the living room, leaving Tom and Sophia to step out onto the porch. The cool evening air was a welcome relief. Despite the joy of the night, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness as she thought about her circumstances. Tom was everything anyone could ask for: kind, funny, and considerate. Yet, as she rested her hand on her belly, she felt a barrier between them that she couldn't ignore. As the night wore on, Sophia pondered her growing affection for Tom. She admired him, not just for his good looks, but for the ease with which he brought light into her life. However, the thought of involving him in her complicated situation held her back. She believed he deserved someone without complications, someone who could offer him a simple, straightforward love. Tom, seemingly oblivious to Sophia's inner turmoil, continued to bring joy into her life. As the night ended and he stood to leave, he paused, looking earnestly into her eyes. "Sophia, I had a great evening. Thank you for inviting me," Tom said sincerely. Sophia smiled, her heart full yet heavy. "Thank you for coming, Tom. It means a lot to me." Sophia's next morning started like any other, with the familiar rituals of preparing for work and the added challenge of navigating the world while heavily pregnant. Her thoughts, however, lingered on the previous evening's dinner with Tom, which had brought a warmth to her heart that felt both comforting and bittersweet. As she entered the nursing home, still replaying snippets of laughter and conversation from the night before, she was unprepared for the sight that greeted her in the changing room. A bouquet of wild daisies sat proudly on the central table, their simple beauty striking against the stark backdrop of lockers and benches. For a moment, Sophia admired them from afar, thinking how lucky the recipient was to receive such a thoughtful gift. Her colleagues' stares pulled her from her reverie, their eyes flicking between her and the bouquet with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. Curiosity piqued, Sophia approached the table and saw the note nestled among the flowers. Reading Tom's words, "It was a lovely dinner, Sophia. I wish it never ended," her heart fluttered with a mix of surprise and joy. The bouquet was for her. Flustered and eager to thank Tom, Sophia scanned the bustling corridors and various rooms of the nursing home, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. It struck her then just how little she knew about his role here. Their conversations had touched on many things, but specifics about his job weren't among them. He had been vague, and she hadn't pressed, comfortable just to enjoy his company. Returning to the changing room after her unsuccessful search, Sophia was met with the same knowing looks from her colleagues. This time their expressions were tinged with amusement rather than curiosity. An older nurse, her eyes twinkling with mischief, leaned in close. "What exactly did you do to catch Mr. Nichols's eye? He rarely even talks to us." Confusion washed over Sophia. "Mr. Nichols?" she echoed, the name not making any immediate connections in her mind. "Yes, Tom Nichols," the nurse elaborated, watching Sophia's reaction closely. "He's the founder of this nursing home, didn't you know?" The room seemed to spin as Sophia absorbed this new piece of information. Tom, the man who had helped her without a second thought, who had made her laugh and given her hope during a simple dinner, was the founder of the very place that had offered her a new beginning. She felt a cocktail of emotions: astonishment, admiration, and an intensifying sense of connection to Tom that was now laced with a newfound respect. Gathering her thoughts, Sophia clutched the note a little tighter. The revelation explained the deference people showed Tom, and perhaps his ability to be so generous and kind. The day had crawled by, each hour stretching endlessly as she half expected Tom to appear at any moment. Her colleagues' teasing remarks and knowing looks hadn't helped, only serving to heighten her awareness of his absence. Finally, as she stepped outside, Resigned to the lonely walk home, she heard the familiar rumble of Tom's truck pulling up beside her. He jumped out with a cheerful grin, his presence suddenly filling the empty space around her. "Need a ride?" he asked, his voice carrying a light, playful tone. Sophia couldn't help but smile, her earlier anxieties melting away in the warmth of his casual demeanour. "Thank you, Tom. And thank you for the flowers. They were beautiful," she said, as she climbed into the passenger seat. Tom's face lit up with a sincere pleasure at her appreciation. As they drove, Sophia glanced at him, noting the incongruity of his rugged, work-worn clothes with what she now knew of his status. "I have to ask, why do you look more like a regular construction guy than the owner of the nursery?" she inquired, her tone light yet curious. Tom laughed, a rich, hearty sound that seemed to echo around the truck. "I guess I like to stay hands-on. Believe it or not, I still hold the position of a plumber here while formerly being the CEO," he explained. His eyes twinkled with a mix of pride and humility. Sophia listened, fascinated by this revelation. Tom's approachability and down-to-earth nature made him all the more admirable. But as the conversation deepened, Tom shared more about his past, his voice growing somber. He told her about his previous life as a successful businessman, his wrongful imprisonment on false charges of domestic abuse, and the subsequent betrayal by his ex-wife who left him financially ruined and personally shattered. Sophia's heart clenched as she listened to Tom's story of loss and injustice. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you," she murmured, her voice thick with empathy. "It was tough, especially with my mom's condition. She had dementia, and there was no one to look after her when I was locked away. She passed before I could make things right," Tom continued, his voice laced with a deep, lingering guilt. The truck slowed to a stop outside Sophia's home, but neither of them made to exit immediately, caught up in the gravity of the conversation. "That's why I built the nursing home," Tom said, looking over at Sophia with a resolve that bordered on fierce. "No one should have to go through what my mom did. I wanted to create a place where the needy could receive care and dignity in their last years." Sophia reached out, touching his arm gently. "You've turned your pain into something beautiful, Tom. That's incredibly brave." Tom gave her a grateful smile, his eyes reflecting a mix of past pain and present strength. "Thanks, Sophia. It means a lot to hear that from you." As Tom walked her to the door, Sophia felt a profound respect for the man who had endured so much and yet had emerged with the desire to help others. Her own troubles seemed less daunting in the shadow of his resilience. She invited him in, not wanting the evening to end, keen to learn more about this remarkable man who had unexpectedly become a part of her life. A decade had swiftly flown by since Tom first placed a bouquet of wild daisies on Sophia's desk, a simple gesture that had marked the beginning of a deep and enduring connection. Sophia stood in the bustling playground watching her 10-year-old son, Noah, dart among the swings with a tireless energy that both amused and exhausted her. "Noah, stay where I can see you," she called out, her voice firm yet tinged with laughter. Noah paused, turning back with a grin. "Mom, I know you don't have to keep saying it," he protested, his tone playful yet exasperated. Sophia shook her head, her smile broadening as she watched him scamper off again. Now, as the head nurse at the nursing home, her days were a blend of challenges and triumphs, but none so rewarding as her family life. Tom, ever the pragmatist and dreamer, had transformed not only the nursing home but also her world. His insistence on balance and health was a constant refrain in their busy lives, and though Sophia often brushed off his concerns with a stubborn dedication to her work, she cherished his support and the stability he brought to their home. Their marriage had blossomed over the past 8 years, filled with moments of joy and the chaos of raising 2 young children. Noah, curious and bold, had seamlessly assumed Tom as his dad, a bond forged not by blood, but by love and daily presence. Emily, their spirited 3-year-old daughter, adored her big brother, her laughter a frequent soundtrack in their home. Sophia's gaze drifted back to the playground, where Noah and Emily were now playing together, their heads bent in serious conversation over a bug they had found in the grass. She felt a surge of gratitude for the life they had built, so different from the uncertainties of her own childhood. Tom had stayed true to his vision for the nursing home, integrating it as a community hub where those with ample means and those without could receive care with dignity. His commitment to social justice had only deepened their connection, reinforcing Sophia's belief in their shared values. Later that day, as the family gathered around the dinner table, the conversation turned to plans for the nursing home's upcoming anniversary celebration. Tom shared his ideas with enthusiasm, his eyes alight with the passion that had first drawn Sophia to him. "We're thinking of expanding the community outreach program," Tom explained, serving up a dish of Sophia's favourite pasta. "We want to offer more than just care. We want to create a space where the elderly can teach, interact with the community, and feel valued." Sophia nodded, her mind racing with ideas. "That sounds wonderful. And maybe we could start a little garden project. It could be therapeutic, and the kids can get involved too," she suggested, glancing at Noah and Emily, who were giggling over their spaghetti. Tom's smile widened. "I love that idea. It's perfect," he agreed. As the meal progressed, laughter and light filled the room. Sophia looked around at her family, her heart full. This was her life now, rich in love and purpose, anchored in a community that valued every individual. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace, grateful for the winding road that had brought her here, to this moment, surrounded by the people she loved most. 2 months later, in the quiet corridors of the Willow Creek nursing home, the air was usually filled with the soft melodies from a distant radio. But today it was pierced by the sharp clack of approaching heels. Sophia paused, her hand lingering on the linen cart, as a familiar and unwelcome voice echoed down the hallway. "Sophia, is that really you?" "My, you haven't changed a bit," Rose declared with a hint of disdain, her eyes narrowing as they settled on Sophia. The woman before her, Rose, mother to Lucas and the orchestrator of many painful memories, stood with her arrogance draped around her like a shawl. Sophia's throat tightened, memories of harsh words and cold cash flashed before her eyes, but she held her composure. "Oh, and working in such a respected place. Who would have thought?" Rose continued, her tone dripping with mockery, her lips twisting into a cruel smile. Sophia listened silently, her calm demeanour a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling within her. She had known this moment might come. After all, it was she who had played a pivotal role in admitting Rose to this facility. A fact unknown to Rose, whose son had once left Sophia to face the world alone, pregnant and scared. The tirade of insults and jabs seemed to stretch on endlessly until the sound of youthful laughter cut through the tension. Noah, Sophia's 10-year-old son, came bounding down the hallway, his features a mirror image of the father he had never met. "Mommy, look what I made in art class today," he exclaimed, waving a colourful drawing. Rose's words faltered, her eyes widening as they took in Noah's face. The resemblance to Lucas was unmistakable, and in that moment, Rose's facade crumbled, replaced by a sudden, awkward politeness. "He looks just like my Lucas at that age," she managed to say, her voice a mix of wonder and regret. Before Sophia could reply, another figure appeared. Tom approached with Emily in his arms. His presence was a comforting reassurance to Sophia. Rose felt the dynamics of the room change as she turned towards Tom, her smile wide with genuine gratitude. "Thank you so much, Mr. Nichols," she said warmly, her voice filled with sincere appreciation for his generosity. Tom, in response, simply nodded in acknowledgement. His eyes shifted to meet Sophia's, where a silent exchange occurred, a look that conveyed mutual strength and support without the need for words. It was a brief moment, but it spoke volumes about their shared resolve and understanding. Tom put Emily down, and she ran off giggling to her brother. He slowly approached Rose, who was by now seated on the sofa. He squatted in front of her and took her hands into his. "You know, Rose, what you and your son did to Sophia, and to the child she was carrying, was beyond forgiveness," Tom stated calmly, holding Rose's gaze. "Yet here we are. Sophia is not only the head nurse but also the heart of this place. And it was she who insisted we take you in, despite my reservations." Rose's face paled, her mind reeling from the revelation. The impact of her past actions, now fully realized, seemed to physically weigh her down. "Sophia, Rose started, her voice trembling. "I never thought I'd see you here, of all places." She sighed, a long, weary exhalation. "My health has been declining. I lost touch with my son. There was no one else. This place had an opening, and they said it was good, so here I am." Both women took in the gravity of their reunion. Sophia was aware of the eyes on them, the staff's curiosity piqued by the evident history between the two. "I'm sorry, Sophia," Rose said finally, her eyes not meeting Sophia's, "for everything that happened. I was wrong, so very wrong." Sophia felt a complex cascade of emotions. The pain from the past mingled with the sight of Rose, so diminished and repentant. "Thank you, Rose. That means more than you might realize," Sophia managed to say, her voice laced with years of unspoken hurt. "Please enjoy your stay, Rose, and let the past be just that. Past," Tom cut in and concluded, his tone firm yet not unkind. Taking Sophia's hand, Tom led his family away, leaving a stunned Rose to grapple with her newfound reality. In the common room of Maple Grove Nursing Home, Rose sat quietly in the armchair by the window, her wrinkled hands resting on a worn-out copy of a novel she no longer read. Her gaze was distant, lost in the garden outside where autumn leaves danced in the gentle breeze. But her mind was far from peaceful. Years had passed since her son, Lucas, had squandered the family fortune. It all began, she realized, during those formative years when she had indulged every one of Lucas's whims, mistaking material gifts for affection. Each memory of Lucas's careless laughter, mixed with the clinking of expensive toys and gadgets, echoed in her mind. Lucas had been charming and reckless, qualities that had initially filled Rose with pride. He had been her golden boy, the center of her universe, but the world outside their opulent bubble was not so forgiving, nor so easily impressed. His charm wore thin as his entitlement grew, and his ventures, ranging from risky investments to extravagant startups, bled money like sieves. Looking back, Rose realized that her unconditional support had perhaps been a disservice, a barrier that prevented Lucas from grasping the true value of perseverance and humility. The fortune that should have secured their family's future became nothing more than fuel for Lucas's lavish parties and failed business ventures. It vanished like smoke, leaving nothing but ash and regret in its wake. For now, she watched the leaves fall, each one a reminder of things and people lost, and the fleeting nature of time. In the days that followed, Sophia grappled with a complex storm of emotions. Each morning, she reminded herself of her professional duties and the ethics that guided her practice, but the personal history that tangled her thoughts made each day weigh heavily upon her. Sophia observed Rose from afar, noting how she tentatively approached other residents, her smile tentative yet hopeful. Over meals, she watched Rose listen to stories, her laughter joining in cautiously. It seemed that each passing day wove Rose more tightly into the fabric of the community that Sophia cherished and protected. One brisk evening, Sophia made her rounds with a heavier heart than usual. As she neared Rose's room, her steps slowed. The soft sounds of a radio playing old jazz tunes seeped into the hallway. Sophia paused outside the door, her hand raised to knock but frozen by hesitation. After a moment of silent debate, Her professional resolve nudged her forward, and she gently tapped on the door. Rose looked up as the door creaked open, her face etched with surprise and something akin to fear. She fumbled with the knitting needles in her hands, a half-finished scarf lapsing into her lap. "Sophia, Rose started, her voice faltering, strained with the weight of unspoken apologies and years of separation. "Rose, let's start anew," Sophia interrupted, her voice firmer than she felt, a resolute decision anchoring her words. She stepped fully into the room, her presence commanding yet gentle. "You're part of this community now, and as such, it's my responsibility to ensure you feel welcome and cared for, just as I do for every resident here." Rose's eyes widened, the barriers she had built bracing for rejection, not reconciliation. She swallowed hard, her hands clasping tightly in her lap. "Thank you, Sophia. I don't know if I deserve such kindness, but I am profoundly grateful," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. Sophia nodded, allowing a small, sincere smile to curve her lips. "We all have our paths, Rose. Here, now, yours includes being a part of a community that values respect and care. Let's move forward with that in mind." As Sophia turned to leave, her steps felt lighter, a weight lifting from her shoulders, a weight she had carried for years, layered with professional duty and personal hurt. Forgiving was indeed not about forgetting. It was about freeing oneself from the chains of past grievances. And in this unexpected place, surrounded by those who had once been mere strangers, Sophia discovered a renewed understanding of forgiveness. It wasn't just an act of mercy towards another. It was a profound gift to oneself, a strength that transcended the darkness of past conflicts and illuminated the path to healing and peace. Time went on. Sophia often noticed Rose sitting alone in the common area, her eyes occasionally flickering towards the entrance with a wistful expression. Rose was isolated, her days marked by the silent ticking of the clock and the occasional shuffle of nurses' feet outside her door. The usual buzz that accompanied visitors never seemed to stop at her door. It pained Sophia to see this, especially knowing that Lucas had become an enigma, his whereabouts unknown. Sophia shared her observations with Monica one evening. Surprisingly, Monica's reaction was not what Sophia expected. Despite the tangled past between Rose and her family, Monica felt a wave of sympathy for the elderly woman. "It's sad, really," Monica mused, her voice tinged with genuine concern. "Everyone deserves some compassion no matter what." Inspired by their conversation, Sophia hatched a plan of subtle kindness, a small act that might pierce the loneliness that clung to Rose like a second skin. With her mother's unexpected blessing, Sophia decided to invite Rose over for dinner. It was a simple gesture, but one laden with the possibility of healing old wounds. The evening arrived, bathed in the golden hues of a setting sun. Rose, dressed in her best yet slightly outdated dress, was visibly nervous, her hands trembling slightly as Sophia introduced her to Monica. To everyone's surprise, the initial awkwardness soon gave way to laughter and shared stories, revealing commonalities that drew Monica and Rose into a budding friendship. They talked about everything from their favorite books to the wild dreams they had when they were younger. It was as if the years had peeled back, allowing them to see each other anew. From a distance, Sophia observed Rose, noting the profound change in her. The old Rose seemed completely transformed. Her eyes, once dull with resignation, now sparkled with an unspoken gratitude. They seemed to silently thank Sophia, not only for forgiving her, but also for lifting the heavy shroud of loneliness that had cloaked her existence and infusing her days with unexpected joy. Monica, observing her daughter's compassionate efforts, felt a swell of pride. Sophia had not only forgiven Rose, but had also extended an olive branch, showing a depth of kindness that was rare and precious. "You're truly remarkable, Sophia," Monica said later that night, her voice thick with emotion. As days turned into weeks, the newfound friendship flourished. Sophia watched as her mother and Rose grew closer, their days filled with shared activities and hearty conversations. One Sunday morning, Tom and Sophia took the kids to the amusement park. Rose and Monica were supposed to spend the day in the garden reading. When Monica came out, Rose looked at her, her gaze lingering. "Monica, you don't look well." Monica laughed, her voice light. "Well, that's not a very nice thing to say, Rose. I don't like your looks either," she teased, placing the tray on the table. But Rose didn't laugh. Her eyes narrowed, a look of concern clouding her face. "No, I mean it. Something's not right. You should see a doctor." Monica waved her hand dismissively. "I'm fine, just a bit tired. Nothing to worry about." But Rose's seriousness didn't change. She insisted, her voice shaking. "Monica, please listen to me. I know when something is wrong." She dialed 911, and within minutes paramedics arrived, and Monica was rushed to the hospital. Tests revealed a severe blockage in a major artery. The doctor explained that if they hadn't caught it in time, Monica could have suffered a heart attack, possibly even fatal. That evening, as Sophia sat by her mother's hospital bed, holding her hand, tears streamed down her face. She thought of Rose, of the inexplicable intuition that had saved Monica's life. In that moment, the full weight of forgiveness settled on her heart. It wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a bridge to miracles. Returning to the nursing home later that night, Sophia found Rose still awake, waiting. The old woman looked up, fear and hope mingling in her eyes. "How is she?" Rose whispered. "She's going to be okay," Sophia replied, her voice choked with emotion. "Thanks to you?" Rose's eyes filled with tears. Sophia knelt beside her, embracing her gently. "You saved her life, Rose. Thank you." They sat in silence, the moonlight streaming through the window, casting soft shadows around them. For Sophia, the journey to forgiveness had been long and hard, but tonight she knew it had been worth every step. Forgiveness had not only healed old wounds, it had saved the most precious person in her life. Their anniversary was approaching, and Tom, inspired by Sophia's generous spirit, suggested a family trip to the coast. Sophia agreed, excited at the prospect of creating new memories with Noah and Emily. The journey was joyful, filled with songs and stories. Sophia had planned a detour to Mrs. Campbell's grave, a mentor who had been a beacon of support in her life. Standing by the grave, Sophia shared a few heartfelt words of gratitude, her family quietly supporting her. The trip continued, the car winding along coastal roads, the sea a shimmering expanse to their right. As Sophia drove, she glanced in the rearview mirror at Noah and Emily, who were sound asleep, tiny, peaceful smiles on their faces. Turning to Tom, she caught his warm, loving gaze. In that moment, Sophia felt an overwhelming sense of happiness and fulfillment. Life, with all its complexities, was profoundly beautiful. And as the car hummed along the road, she knew deep in her heart that love and kindness were the true keys to a happy ending.